Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is May 23rd, 2025, and let's get to the news and updates happening in Ukraine and Russia, shall we? So today I'm going to do a map update, and also I'm going to cover an announcement that Putin made yesterday, which pretty much confirms that Russia is kickstarting its summer and fall offensive in Ukraine. And as I've mentioned, my personal opinion is that this is going to be the very last one that Russia is going to be able to conduct, because by the end of this year, they're going to have catastrophic levels of decay in their military. And there's already plenty of videos and open source intelligence agencies that confirm that the Russian stockpiles of weaponry and armored vehicles are running extremely low. So Putin doesn't have much time left to have success. And he still is under the illusion that he can capture 4 Ukraine oblasts fully. That is Kharkiv, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Zaporizhia, so the entirety of eastern Ukraine. And then he's going to try to freeze the conflict until next time, until they rearm and continue pushing a few years down the line. I think that's the best case scenario for Putin right now. So of course, this announcement yesterday by Putin was about the creation of a buffer zone between Bryansk, Kursk, Belgorod Oblast, and the Ukrainian border. He wants to create a 15-kilometer buffer zone. And we understand very well that this is nothing more but an announcement of this new offensive that the Russians are planning. There's a great video that actually came out on YouTube from Covert Cabal. It's a YouTube channel that analyzes the Russian stockpiles of armored vehicles and what they have left in their military bases in Russia. And he confirmed pretty much that there's virtually very little left in these bases, especially the ones that are close to NATO countries like Finland and the Baltics. And so they've transferred everything to eastern Ukraine or other territories that are occupied by the Russians, or the Russian oblasts that border Ukraine. So Russia doubles down, and they really believe that they're going to have success by the end of this year, which is very unlikely considering that Ukraine continues to receive support from Europe and the United States. And Ukraine also, and we'll talk about it, has drone technologies, so it can strike deep down within Russia. And Ukraine has resumed its long-range drone activity in Russia for the last 2-3 days, stopping air traffic and, making the life of ordinary Russians very difficult, which is what we want. So another update I want to give you guys, and before I do the update on the map, I also need to mention that this is clearly an indication that Russia is not planning for peace anytime soon. So what we're witnessing right now with this whole process of peace talks and conversations between the Russian delegation, the Ukrainian delegation, European delegation, the Americans, is that it's just an imitation and nothing's actually getting done. And unfortunately, Ukraine has to play that game, that diplomatic game of pretending that, yes, we're involved, we're trying to do our best, because Trump, unfortunately, is easily fooled by the Russians. Trump, the reason why he's doing this is that he really wants to deal with the Russians. He really believes that he can get some massive business deal with Putin, that he's going to have access to those tremendous resources that Russia has. But there's one problem. There's China. And China made it very clear when Xi Jinping came to Moscow a few weeks ago during the Victory Day week that you're not making any deals with the Americans without us, or without us knowing and our approval, which is likely not going to happen because Russia is a vassal state of China and they're deeply dependent on China to continue this war. So China has the final word here. And so what Trump wants and what Putin wants are diametrically different, and there's never going to be a deal. But unfortunately, Trump still lives in this world that he believes that somehow Putin is going to agree to some sort of deal between Washington and Moscow. That's just not going to happen because China has the final say, and China has a lot of influence over Putin at this stage because they're so dependent on Beijing for banks doing business between one another, the Russian banks and the Chinese banks. China, of course, provides a lot of military support indirectly and directly. And there's also a lot of Chinese trade going on. They're purchasing a lot of the raw resources that Russia has. So Moscow is deeply dependent on China. So basically, I think Russia still has until the end of this year to continue pushing. And I think that within 2026, early 2026, Russia is going to be seeking for some sort of frozen conflict, as I've mentioned. So you guys can let me know in the comment section what you guys think about my kind of analysis of the future, what's going to happen. But I think that this is a pretty realistic, pragmatic analysis of the way that things are going. But this unfortunately means that Russia still is going to continue pushing, will continue to be brutal for the next few months by the end of this year. And I think that the main thrust, and we're already seeing it to be quite honest, the main thrust of the Russian push is going to be in the Pokrovsk region. They're doubling down. I think that this is where they're going to be concentrating even more troops, even more armored vehicles. And you're seeing that for the last few days and weeks, they've been pushing heavily in the center of this region between Toretsk and Pokrovsk. So they've had very little success over the last few months at going around Pokrovsk. We've seen that the Ukrainians have stabilized the situation around Shevchenko and also the area of Kurakhove, where Russia had a lot of success in the early fall, late winter season. But then the Ukrainians were able to stabilize this entire region. And so Russia, instead of trying to continue pushing here, they have refocused their attention in the center here towards the area of Novopoltavka, Malenivka, so this road that connects Pokrovsk, Toretsk, and Konstantinivka, and all the other major cities that are still under Ukraine control in Donbass. So unfortunately, you're seeing that the Russians are having success here. They're pushing little by little over the last few days, which is an area of concern, to be quite honest, because you're seeing that eventually they will be able to encircle Pokrovsk if they continue having success here. So there needs to be major counteroffensives by the Ukrainians over the next few weeks to stabilize the situation here. So again, even though the Russians are in dire need of armored vehicles, of tanks, etc., they still have plenty of meat that they can unfortunately butcher. And that brings me to the other topic that I want to talk about. We've seen a resumption of Ukrainian drone attacks in Russia over the last few days, which is great news because, again, I need to reiterate that Ukraine needs to be doing this on a daily basis, bringing the war back to the Russians, and not just any ordinary Russians, but the middle class and elite class Russians. That is in Moscow, St. Petersburg, the large urban centers of Russia need to be hit constantly. And of course, it needs to be military bases, important factories that are helping the production of weapons for the Russian military. And that's what Ukraine is continuing to do. And again, with all these drones flying and the hundreds of them that are flying every single day, that stops the air traffic. And planes are grounded in airports and their lives are made more difficult. And that is exactly the message that Ukraine needs to send out, that you are not immune to this war and you're going to be impacted. So I think that Ukraine needs to double down because this is the one of the many ways that Ukraine can really stop this Russian kind of immunity, the sense that these Russian people have that, you know, they're so far away from the war, nothing's going to be impacting them. So that is great news that we've been seeing a resumption of these Ukrainian drone attacks over Russian territory. And of course, Ukraine is focusing primarily on military targets, whether it be military bases, HQs, factories. They're producing, again, gunpowder or optics or other crucial components. Ukraine has to focus on that. And additionally, some other good news as well. In Oryol Oblast, an Mi-8 helicopter crashed and the pilots died. The Russian pilots died. So that is another great announcement today. The Russians confirmed that this helicopter crashed. It's unknown how it happened, but again, -1 helicopter for the Russian military. So with all that, guys, I think that's pretty much the update for today. I covered Putin's announcement of the buffer zone, which pretty much confirms that Russia has kickstarted its new summer offensive. We'll have to wait and see where exactly the Russians are going to continue pushing or where the main thrusts of their offensive is going to be. We already know that Pokrovsk is one of them based on the amount of intensity of pushes that we've been seeing over the last few weeks. There could be some other perhaps offensive in Kharkiv region, in Sumy, of course, and perhaps in northern Ukraine. But Ukraine, of course, is at a stage that it needs more help from its partners. And unfortunately, we're also seeing that the United States isn't really present anymore for Ukraine, Trump is not really interested in continuing the support for Ukraine, although I did mention in my most recent YouTube community post that the vast majority of Americans, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they do support the continued flow of military assistance to Ukraine. And I do believe that that pressure will eventually cannot be ignored by Trump, and he will not be able to just sit and say, well, it's not my war, I'm going to have to withdraw completely and I'm not going to be involved in this. I think that there's going to be enough pressure that he will have to eventually come back and say, you know what, we need to provide more sanctions on Russia, we're going to provide more weaponry or sell more weapons to Ukraine. I think he won't have the choice, because polls don't lie, and when your popularity sinks and are going to start tanking because of your position to this war that is pro-Russian, I think Trump will realize that he needs to start backing Ukraine. But we'll see. So with all that, guys, I'm very thankful for your support. Let me know in the comment section what you think about any of my comments, my analysis of the current situation. And I'm very, very thankful for your continued support for this channel and the Ukrainian cause. Continue supporting the military, the Ukrainian military, and the Ukrainian people. They absolutely need it right now, because this is a very crucial moment. I believe that by the end of this year, it's going to set the tone of how this conflict in its current stage is going to end for now, because we know that the Russians, until they're completely crushed militarily, the regime collapses, they're going to continue trying to bite off more territory. And their main goal, their main objective has always been to take Kyiv, destroy Ukrainian independence, and get rid of Ukraine entirely, unfortunately. This is an existential war for the Ukrainians. So if Russia thinks that they're going to have an easy next couple months, that's not going to be the case. And the Ukrainians are going to do everything possible to stop them wherever possible, because the Ukrainian strategy, and I've talked about it so many times, is about just a defensive war. It's a war of attrition, and Ukraine right now doesn't have the resources to be conducting massive offensives and counterattacks to retake back occupied territory. So the only hope for Ukraine right now is to inflict maximum casualties on the Russians. Unfortunately, that's the only solution for now. Unless, of course, NATO steps in or other allied countries can step in and offer some, defensive protection for Ukraine in other regions. But that's, for now, a pipe dream. Thank you so much, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!